I edited, no exaggeration, a few thousand videos in my life, but while I edited for other directors, just recently I've done it for a film I wrote and directed. Let's talk about dealing with feedback on your edits, because that's what makes or breaks a great editor. And for my short film Yellow Ticket, I decided to divide the feedback process into 3 phases. But before I explain in detail, I want to ask a question. Is one a good editor if he or she needs no feedback to get things done? I mean, just think about it. If you're hiring a crew to do some construction work, right? You're expecting them to do everything just as the blueprint lays out without your input. You just want the final product. So should it be the same for the film editor? After all, the script serves as a blueprint, right? I think this is a very important question to answer, because the way you deal with feedback is paramount to the way you are perceived by the people you collaborate with. And this directly influences word of mouth and the eagerness of your clients to work with you again. Okay, we'll be looking at 7 specific decisions I had to make in the edit. We'll talk about some practical tips and how feedback informed how I dealt with them. The first one is about the performance choice for the interaction between 2 teachers in the first minute of the film. I asked Paulina Hapko, the actress, to flirt in that scene, and Renee Zeger to avoid engaging in the conversation as much as possible. I wanted to achieve some level of awkwardness between the 2 of them, and usually in such a scenario I bounce ideas off the director before we send it to anyone else for feedback. But in this case, I'm the director, so I had to go about it differently.
And action.
For the first round of feedback, I sent it to 2 of my editor friends, Ricky and Erwan, as well as to my producer Adrianna. I called it an assembly edit, but it was an edit, the first edit, right, of the film. I just called it this way just in case it's not perfect, you know. I guess the imposter syndrome showed up, or yeah, something like that. They helped me to realize which moments require more attention, or about the need to use more reaction shots. We'll get to that in a second. So I did another pass on that edit, adding some sound effects from Soundly and generally doing some polishing work. Then I was ready for the second batch of feedback, and this time I reached out to friends who have even wider experience. Notably to Simon Smith, editor of HBO's Chernobyl, Spaceman, Free Body Problem, but he's also a director. Darius Breed, who you might know as D for Darius. He's a friend and a filmmaker with an incredible skill of giving feedback and analyzing films. And Alex Familian, who is both director and editor as well. Their feedback was different because it focused on the source of the tension and on the emotion that certain cuts provide. And after that round, it was clear to me that that interaction in the first minute of the film is not translating well on the screen. The awkwardness that I was after was really just confusing and misleading. Luckily, I did a take where I asked them both to run it as if they despise each other, and mixing the 2 variations, I ended up with something that works better. It's not confusing and introduces that element of this is not going to be the normal lesson. Another thing that Darius and Alex mentioned in their feedback was the moment where they felt completely hooked. It's very helpful to know such a thing because it's hard to realize it yourself when you're so attached to the material you have. And their advice was to condense the beginning so that we get to that point faster. I did a few things to accomplish that. For example, I cut out a sentence that worked on the page but felt redundant in the edit.
Cliche? Well, fair enough.
The first round, the one with Erwan and Ricky, helped me to realize another problem. Too few reaction shots. Ricky pointed out this moment at 9:50 and that reaction of confused kids would help to enforce that building frustration in the teacher. And it's not that I wasn't aware of that in the edit. After all, it was that assembly edit, right? And I felt that there are a few things I will have to tweak. But such feedback is also about confirmation. So you might be thinking like, I don't know, maybe there is something off over here. I feel like there is something off, but let's see what others think about it first. And then you're sure like, yeah, exactly, that's what we need. Obviously, I got more notes. Like for example, this moment when the teacher takes the book from the student. I thought it works quite well, but Simon Smith suggested that pre-lapping teacher's dialogue would make for a smoother cut, better pacing, and obviously he was completely right. I have another 3 edits to show you, but I think it's already clear that such editing decisions have high level of complexity and preference. It's nuanced, it has an emotional impact on the viewer, and different choices will make them feel different about the film. So coming back to that analogy of a construction crew, while building something is a team effort and is complicated as well, the level of nuances and the focus on emotions is what makes filmmaking so much different. Okay, but let's address a situation when you're editing a film you directed yourself, like in my case. Wearing both hats can lead to a deeper connection to the material, which is good on one hand, but on the other, It can leave some blind spots and you might not notice its flaws. Not to mention that having that deep connection, treating it almost like a child, means that receiving feedback might hurt your ego potentially. You might not be ready to face conflicting opinions with your own one because of that attachment. I interviewed quite a few top-level editors, including legendary Walter Murch. You can listen to some of the conversation on this channel and on the Cut to Reveal podcast. And talking to them, it's clear to me that no one expects you to get everything perfect on the first try, and that professionals treat feedback as valuable data points, that editors' judgment on that feedback and interpreting it into specific decisions is often the most important skill in the room. Okay, so I think we already established that the ability to handle feedback well is a marker of a great editor. It's not weakness, but rather the drive to improve and realize that the best idea wins, should always win, no matter who it comes from. Okay, so 4 practical tips on incorporating feedback. Number 1, seek diverse perspectives, because different people will experience and understand your film differently. Separate constructive criticism from personal preference. If you don't take the criticism personally, your judgment will always be better. Remember the core vision of the film, but stay open-minded. If you know what the film is about, you will know what has to be maintained and protected. But at the same time, look for patterns. If more than one person notices something specific, even if they use completely different words to describe it, you have to give such a note more consideration and figure out its source. Okay, another thing that feedback I got helped me to realize was that emotional, almost pleading line delivery that I've put in the film didn't have the result I intended. It's not scary to see someone trying to be scary, it's scary if they seem to be in total control over the situation. So thanks to the notes, I went from this performance in the early cut
Make me care.
to this one in the final film.
Make me care.
Quite a difference. Okay, the third round of feedback. It was about showing the film to a few people outside of production of the film, but also about going back to Ricky and Erwan, showing them what I've done in the meantime, and about including my cinematographer Mateusz Kanownik. Why so late, you might ask? I've learned that cinematographers are very protective of the visuals, which is understandable and simply put, their work, but it's not helpful in the early stages of editing. We worked together on the shortlist, and we were very specific about what we wanted the camera to do at certain point in the movie. But some of the editing choices I made mixed moments together, and there were shots that weren't supposed to go together as we shot them, like reaction shots that belonged in a different part of the film when the camera was stationary, not moving, and I used them in the moment where camera was supposed to be handheld. So having Mateusz look at the film and point out this stuff, I decided to add some movement effects to a few shots, obviously using my Essential Motion presets and just customizing them if needed. And altogether there are like 8 shots where I used Essential Motion to manipulate the perceived movement of the camera. Okay, so what's the thing that every editor deals with that we haven't talked about yet? Continuity, right? There was a moment where I wanted to compress the action, and I went with a take that I liked for the camera energy, but it was a bit too long, so I decided to do almost a jump cut here. And I like breaking continuity if it has the right rhythm to it. And even though you might disagree, I liked what it did here. In this part of the story, the teacher is frustrated, and it resonates well with such an editing choice. So I thought, yeah, this works. I even showed it to someone, and they were like, yeah, it works, it's cool, it's good. But once more, I saw a pattern where more than one person said it threw them off. I realized that I haven't used another edit like this in the film, and probably that's why it was throwing them off and wouldn't work. I decided to slightly compress edits around that moment and left the stake untouched. Once again proving that feedback leads to narrative clarity, better emotional impact, and viewer engagement. Just listen to that voice message I got from my lead Renee Zager once I showed him the finished edit.
I've shown it to people and they've absolutely loved it. I'm
immensely grateful to my editor friends for providing me with their insights. All of them helped me to shape that story into something I am proud of. Watch Yellow Ticket if you haven't seen it yet, and please help us expand this story into a feature film. There is a link to the crowdfunding campaign in the description. We need any help we can get. Thank you in advance. And as a thank you for contributing, there are exciting perks like the Making of Yellow Ticket ebook and audiobook, where I go into much more detail about the process of making this film. See you next time. Bye.